So good morning, everybody. I'm Franklin Escobedo. I'm the library director of the Larkspur Library, and I want to welcome you to our garden talk today. We'll be beginning in a few minutes. So this is upcoming events. Next Saturday, we have planning the fall winter vegetable garden in July with UC Master Gardener and IJ author Jane Skurich. I think I'm saying her name right. This is made possible by the Friends of the Library, the Marin Master Gardeners, and the Commons Foundation. Don't forget that summer reading is going on. So for the grown-ups that are reading gardening books, we have summer reading bingo. You can download the card, the bingo card from our homepage, and it's fillable online, and then you can always email it back to us when we're done, and we're gonna have some really nice prizes. Again, don't forget to follow us on social media. We have a lot of upcoming programs now that we have live streaming on our Facebook page that we partnered with PBS. Storytime is now being streamed on Wednesdays and Friday on our Facebook page as well. But follow us on our Instagram and social media to see what's coming up. If you somehow have to leave the call early, don't worry. We're recording today's talk, and it will be posted onto the library's YouTube channel. You'll also get a follow-up email from me about today's talk, a Marin Master Gardener survey, as well as the upcoming garden talk. So today we're going to ask people to hold their questions till the end. But when you have a question pop into your head, put it in the Q&A box or in the chat, and then Judy will we will be reading them to Judy, and she'll be answering the questions. So. Again, welcome. We're going to give it a couple more minutes as people come into the room. Again, if you, for some reason, you have to jump off, it will be posted later today onto the library's YouTube channel, and you'll all receive a link in your email. Going backwards, everybody. Okay, again, I'm Franklin Escobedo. I'm the library director of the Larkspur Library, and I'd like to welcome you and thank you all for joining us today. This is our garden talks that are happening every Saturday. So I think we're almost ready to start, Judy. So,
okay.
So let me introduce Judy. Judy's presentation is Organic Fertilizer, the types of fertilizers, what's in them, and why and when to use them. Judy has been a Marin Master Gardener since 2015 and is a member of the Edibles Guild. In recent years, she's made public presentations on growing strawberries and blueberries. As part of the Exploring Habitats program, she teaches second graders about understory wildlife and also performs garden walks for residents as part of the program for Marin Master Gardeners. And does this in conjunction with the Marin Municipal Water District to help homeowners and conserve water. Actually, really quick, let's do a poll. I want to see how many, I keep meaning to do this, to see how many of you are in the Marin Master Gardeners or are part of the program. So just fill out the poll real quick so I can get a count. I do give this data to the Marin Master Gardeners. And when you get the email today with the survey, if you're here to get credit, make sure you fill out the survey because that's how they're giving you credit for the talk. So. I think almost everybody's filled it out. Again, so again, thanks for coming, and I'm going to hand it over to you, Judy. So.
Okay. So can everybody see me right now?
Yes, you're the main focus. So.
Okay. All right. Okay, well, thanks for joining me today. I'm glad to see that there's so much interest in my topic. So it's, always challenging to determine how much information to put into these presentations because I know some of you already know quite a bit about gardening and organic fertilizers, while others of you are beginning gardeners and probably know a whole lot less. I've incorporated quite a bit of detail into this presentation, so bear with me if you happen to be familiar with a lot of the information. I'm going to turn off my video while I show my slide presentation because I don't want to be a distraction. And I will, as Franklin said, I'm going to take questions at the end during the Q&A, but I can always go back to the slides if any of you need to see them again. So with that, I'm going to turn off myself and share the screen. Okay, bear with me here. I'm trying to do the, trying to get my screen to be the, here we go. All right, play from start. And now I'm gonna stop my video. Okay, so, as a master gardener, our overall mission, okay, I'm having trouble here. Let me get to my first slide. Here we go. All right. Our overall mission is to share our knowledge with the public, primarily about home horticulture, pest management, and sustainable landscape practices, especially water conservation. We take the organic approach because it's better for the environment. And this is a picture of a couple of master gardeners at one of our stands at a farmer's garden, farmer's market. But unfortunately, because of COVID, we aren't going to be able to do that this year. So I'm going to begin with talking about the difference between fertilizers and amendments, because I know it's pretty confusing for a lot of people. Fertilizers provide nutrients directly to the plants, where amendments provide help to the plants in an indirect way by improving the soil's ability to keep nutrients and water available for plant roots. Many organic materials do both. Organic fertilizers also serve as amendments by improving the soil, aeration, and also water retention. And some of the more common amendments include things like peat moss and bark and straw, but also a lot of composted materials such as coconut husks, rice hulls, and almond shells. So there's all kinds of natural materials that can be used as amendments. So I'm going to begin by explaining that fertilizers typically contain the 3 macronutrients, which are the most important ones for plants. And the one that's, so the 3 major elements are nitrogen, which is represented usually by an N, phosphorus by a P, and potassium by a K. And they are usually the highest concentrations in any fertilizer. They are the most important. So when you buy a fertilizer at a nursery and you find 3 numbers on it with dashes in between, it's always representing how much nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium are in those, and it's always in the same order. And then most organic nutrient or organic fertilizers also contain secondary nutrients, which are required in smaller amounts, and they include such things as calcium, magnesium, and sulfur. And then they also have what are micronutrients, which are required by plants, but in very small amounts. And here's a list of some of those. Of all of these, nitrogen is the most important because it promotes vegetative growth. It provides nutrition for your leaves and your stems, the green parts of your plant. And that's why it's most important to give plants nitrogen in the beginning of the growing season to give them that boost that they need. Phosphorus enhances flowers and fruits, seeds and roots, and it's most critical in the early part of the summer when plants are just starting to flower and set fruit. And then potassium is not quite as important as the first two, but it is needed for photosynthesis, biochemical reactions, and transporting nutrients in water. So, what are organic fertilizers? Well, organic really means any material that's derived from plants or animals, in other words, living matter. And it technically excludes naturally occurring minerals, even though these do also provide nutrients. And one of my last slides, I'll talk just a little bit about some of the minerals. If you go to the nursery and you don't know if a product that you're buying is actually organic or not, you can always look for the OMRI symbol, because this stands for Organic Materials Review Institute, and they actually review the materials that are contained in that product and will certify it if they believe it's fully organic. So perhaps one of the most important features of organic fertilizers is how slow or fast nutrients are released. Some are very slow, some are fast. Some have both quick and slow release of nutrients. And also, some release more quickly only when the soil is warm and the food web is most active. Fast fertilizers work best with food plants that ripen quickly, like strawberries. And slow ones work best with those that take time to ripen, like root vegetables. Now, one of the sayings that we master gardeners say is feed the soil, not the plant. So, and this is because organic fertilizers contribute organic matter to the soil, they improve the soil structure, and they feed soil microbes. So those are very important. And then also, they can help fight fungal and bacterial diseases. Most of them are balanced, which means that they have NPK as well as the micronutrients. And I know some people always wonder, well, will they attract unwanted animals? And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but in general, if you mix it with the soil, that's not an issue. So there's various different kinds of fertilizers. Dry fertilizers are slower to release and generally last longer. Because they are not water soluble, they need microbes mixed with water to help break them down so the plants can actually absorb the nutrients. And then liquid fertilizers, also known as foliars, can be sprayed onto the leaves and are absorbed immediately, but are more short-lived. Also, they're only effective with daytime temperatures of 85 degrees or less. Adding a surfactant helps it to spread and stick. You can also use liquid fertilizers for sterile soils, new starts, at the end of the season when plants need a boost, when a problem arises, and for potted plants. There's also single-purpose fertilizers, like if you have a nitrogen deficiency and your leaves are yellow, you can get a fertilizer just to deal with that issue. And then but most of them are blends. And then there are plant-based, animal-based, and manure-based. You could probably argue that manure-based could be classified as animal-based, but for this presentation, I've separated out the two. And I'll mention this again, but with the animal-based, you may prefer to use herbivore animals like grass-fed cows, just to avoid picking up any unwanted chemicals. So beginning with plant-based fertilizers, probably the overall best organic fertilizer is garden compost. And if you're not composting now, I highly recommend it. It's pretty easy to do. And there's a lot of information out there about how to do it. Garden compost is really well balanced with NPK plus trace nutrients. It is slow to release throughout the growing season and can last pretty much throughout the summer. Alfalfa meal is considered by some to be the next best to compost or worm castings as a balanced fertilizer that provides a steady release of NPK and sulfur. If you use soy meal, you want to be sure to mix it into the soil because if it's left in clumps, you might get maggots. Cottonseed meal is slightly acidic, so it's good for acid-loving plants like blueberries. Conventionally grown cotton has some of the highest pesticide application rates in the country, and therefore it might have some pesticide residues. So try to use only cottonseed meal that's made from organic cotton. Cottonseed meal is also good for retaining soil moisture. Kelp meal is full of potash or potassium and trace minerals. It's excellent for starting seeds because it mixes, it reduces damping off and fungal problems in seed starts, and it encourages microbial populations, which benefit your plants. But because it's very strong, you have to make sure that you do not over apply it or you'll burn and kill your plants. So here's a few pros and cons to using plant-based fertilizers. As I said, they need the higher temperatures to release, so they work best during the warm season. The advantages are that they are generally lightweight, they don't attract animals, and they're very well balanced nutritionally. Some of the disadvantages are that because they are less concentrated with nitrogen, you may need to use animal fertilizers if you need a good boost of nitrogen. And because they're less concentrated with nutrients, plant-based fertilizers need to be applied at a slightly higher rate, which really doesn't make that much difference if you're just following the directions on the container. But you may need to supplement your plant-based fertilizers with other fertilizers or use it more frequently because they're not quite as strong. So animal-based fertilizer, we'll start with blood meal, and just as the names imply, these things are made from the various materials that their name implies. So blood meal from blood is very high in nitrogen, although it can make your soil a little bit more acidic with regular use. And blood meal can serve a dual purpose if you happen to have deer in your yard, because it is a deterrent not only to deer, but to moles and squirrels, but it can also attract dogs, raccoons, and possums. I use blood meal a lot on my plants in my yard because the deer can reach them, and it's okay to sprinkle it on the leaves. But if you do any overhead watering, you need to make sure that you reapply it if you're trying to deter deer. Bone meal from bones provides mostly phosphorus. Also, it can attract dogs and other unwanted animals. It doesn't move in the soil, so it must be incorporated into the root zone of your plant. Feather meal is ground and dried poultry feathers, high in nitrogen, but its bioavailability is kind of low or slow because it has a protein that makes it harder for the soil microbes to break down. So its life is extended because of that. Fish meals from fish or fish waste, very high in nitrogen, micronutrients, best used during the cool seasons. Worm castings, they release nitrogen quickly, but then they also have this long-term slow release component. Worm castings help inoculate the soil with beneficial fungi and microbes, highly recommended. And then bat and seabird guano, considered by some, especially the growers who grow marijuana up in Sonoma County, as to being the best all-round fertilizer. It's very high in NPK and micronutrients, but as you can imagine, it's expensive because it's hard to get quite a bit of it. So some of the pros of animal-based fertilizers include that it's higher in nitrogen, it releases nutrients more quickly, works better in the cool seasons, and it's best for containers where your plants tend to be limited in the nutrients that the roots can reach out for. But as I mentioned, they could attract rats or raccoons or other unwanted animals. And if you use too much, or if you apply it too early or too close to the roots of your plant, it can burn the roots. So you have to be a little bit more careful with animal-based fertilizers, including manures. So I've listed these kind of in order from the ones that have the most amount of nitrogen to the least amount, because nitrogen is the most critical of all the macronutrients, as I said. With the exception of rabbit, poultry has the highest amount of nitrogen. But all of these have NPK. And with the nitrogen, as I said, it can burn the plants unless it's already composted with carbon-rich materials like leaves or straw or even bedding. Steer manure may contain salts and other residues. So again, try to get some grass-fed animals if that kind of information is provided on the package, or if you are getting it from its source. Dairy cow has less NPK than steer, but also less salt. Horse manure is high in nitrogen, but bedding, especially sawdust, may limit availability. It may also have weed seeds and pharmaceutical residues. Pig is well balanced with NPK, but because it may have some pig parasites and pathogens, it can infect humans, so it's not allowed in many organic farms. And it's best hot composted, which means your compost pile has to reach at least 140 degrees. Sheep is better than cow. Rabbit has more than double the amount of nitrogen than the chicken, and goat's not quite as good as the others. So I think one of the greatest advantages of using manure-based fertilizers is that it's a naturally recycling of waste material. And they are well balanced with NPK and usually contain all the essential micronutrients. However, they can be very bulky and difficult to store and to transport, and they must be aged or composted. I'll talk about that in a second. May attract animals. The nutrient content can vary. Nutrient content varies depending on a variety of things, including what animal it's coming from, how and what it was fed, how the manure was stored, where it was produced, and even the weather conditions while composting. We had an experience over at the Mill Valley Community Garden, where I have a vegetable plot. We had we brought in soil which was dumped in December when the garden was first built, and we were going to use this soil, which had some a lot of nitrogen in it at the time. I don't know if it was necessarily manure, but anyway, it was a couple of years ago. We wanted to move the soil into our garden, our raised beds, and the city neglected to cover it with plastic, and it didn't get moved into our plots until later in the spring. And because of all the rain that we had that winter, a lot of the nitrogen got leached out. And so we had a nitrogen deficiency in our soil that spring. Anyway, just thought I would mention that. So I talked about having to, well, let me just back up here for a second. So manure-based fertilizers contain bacteria and enzymes that speed up decomposition and nutrient release. It's good to age them for 6 to 12 months, preferably 9 to 12 months, to avoid burning the plant roots and contaminating your vegetables if you're using them in a vegetable garden. You want to apply at least 4 months prior to harvest, unless it's really carefully mixed in and kept 6 inches from the stems of your plants. Aging or composting also degrades pest residues, antibiotics, and weed seeds. So it serves a number of purposes. Poultry manure provides up to 75% of nitrogen and is available immediately. In general, horse and dairy cow manures can be tilled directly into the soil only a month or more before planting, because they usually have a high carbon to nitrogen ratio from the bedding and the feed that's mixed in with it. All others provide only about 33% nitrogen. Poor storage, as I just mentioned, can result in nitrogen losses of up to 60%. Surface application, you can lose 20 to 30% just in a few days through the process of gases escaping up into the air. Annual application can acidify soil and increase salts, so you need to be aware of that. And then, of course, manure with bedding has fewer nutrients by volume. I know some people have chickens and they like to compost their chicken manure, but you need, if you're one of those, be sure to add some bedding and water and turn the pile every few weeks. So for the cool season, which around here is basically late fall, all through the winter and early spring, it's a good thing to begin with an Endo Mycorrhizae for inoculating seedling roots. And that's just a fungus that's incorporated in some of these organic fertilizers. Inoculation promotes nutrient absorption and defense against fungi and nematodes. Worm castings are the best all-round fertilizer, especially for containers and raised beds. And you can make tea either from your compost pile or from your worm castings. Worm castings provide quick release for early growth and slow release for sustained growth. A combination of compost or compost tea with kelp meal or fish emulsion is also another highly recommended fertilization program. Kelp meal will last 6 to 12 months, so you want to use it sparingly, and it's strong, as I mentioned before. Alfalfa meal is probably the next best. It releases nutrients steadily over time, but is most available at the peak of the growing season. And then feather meal can kick in after about 2 to 3 months. So during the warm season, from your late spring through the summer and into fall, these are organic fertilizers that your plants might benefit from. The one thing I'll mention here is cottonseed meal is also good for retaining moisture, or maybe I already mentioned that. Anyway, it's usually during the summer when plants bear flowers and set fruit that these kinds of organic fertilizers are most beneficial. This is when plants may need a shot of phosphorus. And in addition to these, you might also consider bone meal or fish meal at that time. The meals generally last about 3 to 4 months, and the worm castings and compost will last 3 to 6 months. So, as I've said, nitrogen is the single most important nutrient for plants, especially to get plants started. So I have a list here of various things that are good sources of nitrogen, kind of from the most to the least, I guess. And I've indicated how long each of these lasts, that are good for the plants, and the best time to apply them. So rabbit and chicken manure, best to apply in the wintertime. Fish meal and worm castings in the spring and into the summer. Same with bat guano or the other ones. So and then blood meal is good both in the spring and the fall, and feather meal in the summer and into the fall. So calcium is a micronutrient. It's probably one of the more important ones. There's several of them. Calcium is needed for enzyme formation, nitrate uptake, and to neutralize excessively acidic soils. It can also help to avoid blossom end rot, which is often a problem with tomatoes and peppers and other vegetables and fruit even. Oyster shells are best for really long-term slow release of calcium. Will last for 1 to 2 years. Oyster shells can fuel microbial growth and balance out acidic conditions. And then there are other sources. In addition to eggshells, there's crab meal, fishbone meal, limestone. Eggshells will last about 3 to 12 months, and they contain a lot of nitrogen and calcium, as well as other micronutrients. So, because calcium is important for your garden, I've got a slide here that shows you in quite a lot of detail how to make the best eggshell fertilizer possible. The important thing really is to dry out the shells, because then they can soak up the soil moisture and microbes, and then that helps to break them down for use by the plants. And if you make yourself some eggshell fertilizer like this, you can use 1 to 2 tablespoons per gallon of potting soil, or about 1/2 cup for a 5-gallon pot of soil. But you might also be lazy like me, where I just toss them right into my compost pile. So some of the micronutrients are minerals, even though they aren't technically considered organic fertilizers. They are essential for plants. They help improve soil structure, resistance to pests and disease, and they can also add flavor to your plants, to your vegetables. Phosphorite is a sedimentary rock high in phosphorus and other trace minerals. Rock dust is usually made from granite, lasting 5 to 10 years, and is needed for plant immunization and increases the plant's tolerance for temperature extremes. Volcanic ash has trace elements of various types and sources. Green sand is a sediment from the ocean floor with a large variety of trace minerals. which helps loosen clay particles, and clay is the type of soil that we have around here, and also improves moisture retention. Gypsum is a soft sulfate mineral that breaks up clay, adds small amounts of calcium, and reduces salt levels. And there's some debate as to whether or not it changes the pH of the soil. Some say it helps acidify the soil, and others say it doesn't. So I don't know about that. And then there's this last one is a sulfate mineral. So before we get to the questions, I just wanted to show that our website, marinmg at ucanr.edu. If you have any questions that you have about problems that you're having, or if you want to identify a plant or anything else about gardening, you can go to our website. It has a whole lot of incredible information on it. Or you can phone our office, which is up in Novato. Normally we have a help desk that you can walk into, but we're closed because of COVID right now. But probably the best thing to do is to take a picture of your plant, whether it's a problem or ID that you've got some questions about, or pests, and you can send us an email along with the photos, and somebody will get back to you, as soon as possible. We also have a leaflet that's available for free. That's emailed quarterly. You just have to go to our website or call the office and get on the list. And then also, as Franklin mentioned, I do garden walks, and this is a program we do with MMWD, and we'll come out, two of us will come out to your yard and walk around with you and answer your questions and check make sure you don't have water leaks, or that your water pressure is appropriate, and so forth. And you can, again, sign up by calling our office or going straight to the website. So with that, I am going to show myself again.
Okay, and our first question, Judy, is what is a good source of zinc? I'm growing a cashew tree, which apparently often suffers from zinc deficiency.
Zinc deficiency. Well, I'm not really an expert on this, but zinc is one of those micronutrients that might benefit from either kelp or fish emulsion, or perhaps some of these sources that have minerals in them. So, but if you want further information, go to our website and or call the office, and somebody can do a lot of research on that for you.
And
okay.
Then, someone asked, how can I test my compost?
Test it to see if it's ready. So composting, I live here in Mill Valley, which is pretty cold. It takes about a good 3 months for my compost to be ready. And it's usually better on the bottom, so that's why you need to turn it on a regular basis and keep it moist. But you're going to know when your compost is ready, because if you take a handful of it, it's going to look like really rich loam soil.
Okay, another question is, I have an azolla fern in my pond. I've been told it's high in nitrogen. What is the best way to process this before adding it into the soil?
Okay, the question is, the person has a fern?
Yeah, an azolla fern in their pond?
In their pond, yes. What's the rest of the question?
I've been told it is high in nitrogen. What is the best way to process this before adding it to the soil?
Yeah, I'm not really clear on the question. It sounds like there might be too much, there might be some nitrogen that's getting into the pond water, maybe running, that's maybe running in from the surrounding soil. So
Well, let me
perhaps,
see
go ahead.
if Burnett wants to ask the question. Maybe she can make it a little clearer.
Sure.
I'm going to unmute you, Burnett. You can speak, Burnett.
Hi, Judy.
Yes, hi.
It's Bernie. I have this Azola fern in my pond. It's just a really tiny little fern. It grows all over the top of the pond, and I've been told that I can harvest it to use to add to the soil.
Oh,
And I was just wondering if you were familiar with it, and if I should dry it out for several weeks or a few days, or if I can just take it out of the pond and throw it onto the soil and let it do its thing.
yeah, I would let it rest for a couple of weeks before adding it to the soil.
Okay.
It's like, you know, I would think it'd be kind of like a cover crop, you know, where you need to add it, mix it in. You know, at the end of the season, I cut off my fava beans and put it into my soil, but I didn't plant for a couple more weeks. So I think, you know, let it compost a little bit first.
Okay. Sounds good. Thanks.
Yep.
Another question is, where does azomite fit into the garden use?
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with what azomite is. Roger, would you like to expand on that?
Let me find him in the chat box, though.
Okay.
You should be, there you go, Roger.
Yeah, well, azomite is like a powder that has, I guess, micronutrients, but I'm not sure, you know, what you do with it. I mean, what you use it as. That's why I was wondering if you had any ideas about that.
Actually, yeah, I'm not familiar with azomite. I don't know if it's a mineral or if it's some kind of organic material.
I think it says it's a rock dust. I think it's like
Oh, okay. Okay.
kind of a powder like that, but
Yeah. Well, not knowing what kind it is, you know, I covered a variety of rock dusts. If it's made from granite, yeah, I mean, it's not going to hurt to add it.
okay.
Just follow the directions as far as, you know, the application rate.
Another question. I mean, double duty, is that a very good animal fertilizer?
I'm not familiar with double duty per se.
Okay, well, that's a brand. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Another question came in. Can you tell us more about Mycorrhizae and how much?
Yeah, that's
and how much is needed.
Well, again, you know, follow the directions that are on the product that you buy because they vary. But it's good to use to help get your plants started. And so, you know, early in the spring. And for those who aren't familiar with the term, it's the little white things that you see in like compost material or in your soil. It's just, a lot of it's microscopic, but some of it you can actually see with your eyes. And it's just, those are microbes basically that help your plant roots absorb the nutrients out of the soil. Okay, are there any other questions?
Yeah, my fuchsia plant were attacked by some sort of fungus. I pulled them out. The hummingbirds are so disappointed.
As probably she was too. Yeah, fuchsia plants can get rust, which usually appears on the underneath side of the leaves. They can also get a variety of other viruses. And the best thing to do, it's too bad that you already pulled them out, because if you remove the damaged leaves, and cut your plant back a little bit, it'll survive. The new growth will come back. How do I purify the soil? Yeah, it's very difficult to purify soil once you have some kind of virus in it. So the best thing to do is to plant something else in that location that is going to be resistant to certain types of viruses, or remove the soil altogether. Like if you have potting soil and you've got, for example, a tomato growing in there, and there's you get a virus, then the best thing to do is replace that soil completely, or at least not plant tomatoes in there. Tomatoes, potatoes, eggplants, peppers, they all belong to the same family, and they're all susceptible to the same type of disease. So, plant something else in there.
So what can be used to help balance alkaline soils?
Yeah, sulfur is a good, you can try sulfur. Any kind of organic matter will help increase the acidity of your soil. So again, compost or any kind of organic fertilizer will help in that respect.
Okay, are there any more questions? Okay, here comes one. I have a bag of leftover builder's lime powder. Is this good for the garden?
Yeah, you don't need to add lime to your soil. We have our soils here in Marin tend to have a pH of about 6.5 to 7, which is really good for most plants. So I wouldn't recommend adding any lime.
Okay, if there's no more questions, you could still put questions in the chat box or the Q&A. Oh, there's one in the chat box. Are there any good mulchers for container vegetables that offer weed reduction and a nutrient boost?
Yeah, compost. And if not compost, as far as mulches, any kind of material like finely ground bark, or some of the other ones that I mentioned were coconut husks, which have a nice fragrance to them, rice hulls. There's a lot of different things that you can use as mulches, and they will break down over time and add nutrients to your potting soil.
Okay, and then someone has an old feather pillow. I've been composting the feathers, but I can also add them directly to the soil, or can I also add them directly to the soil?
This is an interesting question. Feather meal is ground up feathers from chickens. I guess if you have an old feather pillow, I assume it's probably, I don't know, goose, I don't know. But they probably need to be broken down more to a certain extent. Otherwise, they're not going to break down quickly enough for your plants to be able to use them. So if there's any way you can grind up the feathers, then that might be helpful. Otherwise, yeah, you can put them in. Over time, they'll degrade. Yeah. And will help retain moisture in the soil.
Are coffee grounds on their own good for the garden, specifically for vegetables?
Sure, you bet. I add them to my compost pile. Yeah. Best to, I mean, you can put them right in the ground. Some people do, but you know, it's best to throw them into your compost pile along with everything else and let them, you know, decompose for a while. Makes them more available to the plants.
Okay, it doesn't look like there's any more questions.
Okay. Well, thank you everybody for listening to my talk, and I hope that I've been able to give you some good information today. And good luck with your gardening.
Oh, one last one. Our nutrients, what nutrients are in coffee grounds?
Well, coffee grounds tend to increase the acidity of your soil. So I'm not exactly sure what nutrients are in coffee grounds, but I do believe that they add nitrogen because they are acidic. They can make your soil more acidic. They can increase the acidity of the soil. So yeah, good to use.
Okay. I thank you everybody for coming, and thank you again to Judy Orsini for being here. Yeah, so we'll see you guys next time, and you have a great weekend. And don't forget, curbside is now happening at the library, so if you get an email notification about holds, just give us a call. We're doing curbside pickup between 12 and 4, Tuesday through Saturdays now. And keep an eye on our calendars for more events coming soon, and we'll see you next time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.